Now, I spoke at the top of the program about the push for an Indigenous voice to Parliament, how that debate is heating up because we're looking at a referendum possibly in the next 3 years. There is a lot of work going on behind the scenes on this sort of proposal over the past few years. As you know, I've been involved in it, but why has it suddenly come to the front of the political agenda? Well, it's because of what Anthony Albanese said on election night. Have a look.
We can answer its patient, gracious call for a voice enshrined in our Constitution.
Anthony Albanese there on election night. Joining me now live from the Sydney CBD is filmmaker Rachel Perkins. Rachel, thanks so much for joining us. I showed at the top of the program some of your excellent speech this morning. Congratulations on that. And it must be great to have so many religious leaders endorsing this idea.
Oh, it's incredible. I think it's unprecedented in Australia. I mean, have you given your viewers, Chris, the list of groups?
We went through Anglicans, Catholics, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Sikh and more, right?
Oh yeah, they're all there. It's quite incredible.
I think I was
impressive lineup.
I was there representing the lapsed Catholics, but it's strong endorsement. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes to see how you can have a grassroots voice, how various Indigenous communities right around the country, from cities to remote areas, could feed into this process. But the previous government has balked at having constitutional guarantee for that voice. I just interviewed Angus Taylor, as you know, a leading Conservative in the government, and he said that, you know, whatever's worked up, they'll look at with an open mind because they want good outcomes. And I suppose that's the sort of response you at least want at this stage.
Oh, absolutely, because I think, you know, in the Parliament of Australia, everyone wants good outcomes for Australia's Indigenous people. You know, it's just the means to get there that is in slight, you know, dispute perhaps. So, yes, I think you know, you have to take people by their word and, you know, their intent, and that is to do good things in government.
Tell me what you would say to people who argue that this is divisive, that this would be a special privilege for Indigenous people because they get to have a representative body that can talk to Parliament about their issues.
Yeah, well, that's bandied about a lot, and there's a few things that are criticisms. But, you know, as you know, Chris, there's already a provision in the Australian Constitution for the government to make laws around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It's been there, well, since 1967.
Since 67.
So it's already there. Exactly. So really, this is a minor change in some ways, because all it does is ask that when those laws are made, Indigenous people get to have a say on it, give advice to Parliament. Not binding, not a veto, not a third chamber, just advice on practical measures to improve the lives of Indigenous people. That's all.
Now, of course, you are very much your own woman and have carved out an incredible career as a filmmaker, but I know, of course, you're very proud of your father and carrying on some of the work he did. And he was very instrumental as an activist getting that support for the 67 referendum. Amazing support across Australia for that referendum, of course, from all of non-Indigenous Australia as well as Indigenous Australians. And it's funny, just a thought occurred to me this morning. I can't believe I hadn't really thought about it in these terms earlier, given how long we've been talking about this. But given that federal power to take control of Indigenous affairs was agreed at that Constitution in 1967, if you'd said then, if someone had thought then that there should be a voice from Indigenous people to actually give the Parliament some advice, that they should have to consult Aboriginal people when they pass laws for Aboriginal people, it would have been uncontroversial.
Yes, it's a very good point. I mean, people would have just gone, yeah, of course. I mean, I think that, you know, Australians have a sense of fairness, right? That's the thing that almost defines us. And if you're going to make laws in relation to Aboriginal people, it seems fair that Aboriginal people get to have a say about that. And, you know, we're seeing that at the moment, that we've got you know, the largest amount of Indigenous Australians in Australian Parliament. That is fantastic. We hope that continues. It's the first time in federal Parliament we've had, you know, that sort of demographic representation. It's wonderful. But, you know, they represent their constituents. They represent, you know, their parties. And what we're talking about is a voice that just represents the interests of Indigenous people on the ground. You know, so these are local voices. And that's what's important. Local voices having a say about what happens in their communities.
Yeah, and when you talk about the consultation on these issues, of course, governments, Labor and Liberal, over recent decades have always had advisory bodies anyway. They just haven't been official. They've been handpicked. Yeah. And this is Aboriginal people
That's
actually
right.
choosing who represents their case. On that point, I just want to show you a clip from 2017. This is what Malcolm Turnbull said when he was Prime Minister.
Well, I can tell you it would be effectively be a third train. Now, as to its prospects at a referendum, let me tell you, I honestly, as someone who's had some experience in how easy it is to change the Australian Constitution, it would have no prospect of success whatsoever.
Well, there you go, Rachel. You've heard all that before. I just get you to respond to those two propositions, the third chamber argument and the idea that a referendum is bound to fail.
Well, one day it will be revealed who came up with that tag, the third chamber, but I won't do it here. And I think it was deliberately misleading. It was designed as a fear tactic. And unfortunately, Turnbull's leadership will be defined by that moment, I think, sadly. So it's, you know, even Barnaby Joyce has apologised for saying it's a third chamber of Parliament, and good on him. You know,
Yep.
It takes a lot of guts to say when you're wrong. So, you know, I think that nonsense hopefully has gone away. And what was the other? So what was the other thing Malcolm said?
Malcolm said it wouldn't get up. He's lost referendums before. This one wouldn't get up. I think he underestimates the sense of a fair go in the Australian community.
I think so. You know, the last referendum we had on an Indigenous issue was the most successful referendum in Australia, and it was on the basis of fairness. Should people like me be able to be counted in the census, was the question. And the other question was, should the Commonwealth be able to make laws about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? Exactly the thing we're talking about today. We are just adding, and they should be able to have a say about those laws. Not a veto, again, just a say. It's a very practical solution. I mean, really, I don't know what all the controversy's about, but, you know, I'm here to talk about it and push it because I think it's important.
Good on you. Well, thanks for joining us and congratulations. A great speech today and really great to have you on the program, Rachel. Cheers.
Pleasure. Invite me back someday, Chris.
I will indeed. I will indeed. Rachel Perkins there. As I said, she's the daughter of Charlie Perkins, who's just a legendary figure when it comes to Indigenous affairs in this country. And that's the voice, put simply, by Rachel. Just give Indigenous people a say, not binding, on the government implementing laws and policies about Indigenous people. Sounds like a fair go to me.